the door because Rob was out. So if I suddenly kill my audio, it's because there's considerable puppy noise.
Oh, let them in, let them in.
I know. They're so cute.
Okay, I think we are live. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona. And we're really happy to have Lev AC Rosen back with us to discuss the brand new book, Mirage City. And we have a dwindling supply of signed copies left. Um, there we go. I'll go ahead and put a link in the comments field if you'd like to order one. Excuse me. And if you have questions for Lev, go ahead and type them in. And Barbara will bring me on screen in a little bit, and I'd be happy to ask any of your questions. I think that's my spiel, Barbara. Uh, Over to you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. You've really got it down.
I do have it
And,
down.
I know it's our little
Try to
routine.
mix it up just a teeny bit, though.
Just a little for variety's sake. Well, anyway, I'm so pleased to see you again, Lev, because as I said in my write-up, I posted something on Instagram today. Lavender House was one of our really favorite books, the first of four for Evander Mills. Or do you call him Evander? How do you pronounce it?
Evander is how I pronounce it, but
Okay. Evander Mills, Private Eye. And it takes place in the 1950s in San Francisco. And as I previously said when talking to Lev, I was at Stanford in the 50s in San Francisco and completely oblivious to absolutely everything he wrote about, which made me feel, I don't know exactly how it made me feel. Well, for one thing, it was a lot harder to navigate around the bay back then.
Mhm.
I mean, this is before freeways and other things. And I mean, we were past the you have to take a ferry stage because they had actual bridges, but we didn't move around as much as people would today. So, and we didn't get up to the city as much as, I mean, we did. I had Friday night symphony tickets. Back in those days, when you went to the symphony on Friday night, you wore white gloves and high heels. I know
Are
it
you
seems
saying I
incredible
don't
to
wear those
you.
when I go to the symphony?
Well, well, I mean, I've said this before. San Francisco was a really formal town
Hmm.
until maybe 1961, 62, maybe a little after, when all of a sudden we got Haight-Ashbury, and then the war began to change things and all, but in the 50s, San Francisco was still a very, very elegant, formal, kind of like old Boston or old Charleston.
Hmm.
People got dressed up to do stuff. So your comment in regard to this book, that it really is noir, Mirage City. And
Hmm.
that's because life for gay people in the 1950s actually was noir. And
Yeah,
so I
that's what
guess
I
the
would
point that
say.
I'm saying that I completely missed.
I think that, you know, it's so interesting because I do a bunch of research, obviously, San Francisco, and I stumble across some of the most elegant, beautiful things. I read a whole book on just like the department stores back then, and a department store back then was so fancy, beautiful. And the thing I have not gotten into any of my books, but I really want to get into one of them is that one of the department stores around Christmas had a Christmas tree made out of mink stoles. And I just think that's so.
You might want to think about that. But the department store you want to write about is Gump's. Gump's was the classic
Mhm.
San Francisco upscale, full of often completely useless items, but gorgeous. They still have a catalog. But here's an interesting thing. We were talking about traveling in Japan just before we started this. In Japan, the department stores are still like the ones
Hmm.
you're describing. And their food courts, I thought Harrods in London had an impressive food court, but it has absolutely nothing on the Japanese food courts in the department stores. In fact, Rob and I had dinner there the last night we were there because we were so exhausted with navigating Tokyo. And we went in to buy some Japanese pajamas, which we had found in Hokkaido, and which we really loved. And and we got down to the food hall and we thought there can't be any better dining. Well, there are, but probably for the state we were in, the dining choices. So not only is it a food hall, but it's also like a restaurant hall.
Hmm.
But I thought it did remind me of the 1950s. I'm trying to remember the name of the famous department store in Union Square. But I think I told you where my mother refused to go for tea because she was wearing tennis shoes. It's really true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's wild to think about.
Yeah, I don't recall. It wasn't Gump's, but my first wedding ring came from Gump's actually, and it was so much fun to shop there. It was kind of like going to Tiffany's, that kind of a thing. Although it wasn't just a jewelry store, they had all kinds of really beautiful and elegant things. It's surprising because San Francisco, started out as a gold rush. I mean, it was. At the time of the earthquake, San Francisco was really rowdy. I mean, it was still
Yeah, it was
full
kind
of,
of old westy.
no
Yeah.
kidding, it was still full of, bordellos and fishermen. I mean, it had a big Jack London San Francisco. It was a real thing. I think after the earthquake and the process of rebuilding it, um, it began to become more upscale.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's what I have discovered as well. And it's just, it's such a wonderful combination of things, because you get to look at when I'm doing the research, all these photos of what I really think of as being sort of the height of the 50s, upscale, conservative, well dressed. Everyone knows where they're going and how to look for it. But at the same time, there are these sort of undercurrents of criminality, of homosexuality. There's a bunch of stuff that was going on under the surface, including, as I get into it in Mirage City, the sort of pre-leather scene even. There were places by the late 50s where gay bars where the men would go in and it was very sort of rough. It
Yeah.
was rough men looking for other rough men, like the motorcycle club that's in the book.
Yeah, I know. That's very true. Fisherman's Wharf was still fisherman, actually. I mean, it hadn't turned into the complete tourist trap that it is today. Sausalito was just across the Golden Gate Bridge, was pretty much still a fishing village. There were a couple of restaurants that eventually moved over there, but it was very much like that. I'm trying to remember the name of the Italian part of San Francisco. And I mean, there was like Boston, there was an Italian enclave in San Francisco with
Mm,
restaurants and other stuff. There were definite neighborhoods. And then you had Golden Gate Park, which was gorgeous. And, the army at the Presidio had this enormous tract of land. I think they're still trying to figure out what to do with it. I mean, there have been all kinds of competing development ideas for the Presidio because the real estate is so incredibly valuable.
mhm.
Um, so, San Francisco had an art scene, it had a high society scene. North Beach, thank you, Patrick. Patrick uses the chat function to help me out. North Beach, right? And it had a bunch of they weren't gay clubs particularly, but it had a bunch of clubs. So we were discouraged as undergraduates from going there. We had a Russian colony because my Russian teacher used to take us up to Russian Hill, and we would on a weekend we would mingle with the Russian community. Many of them had fled Russia from like Vladivostok, and
Mhm.
San Francisco was like in Portland, Seattle, but San Francisco was a welcoming port. So for a small city geographically bounded, it really had a lot of variety.
Yeah, no, that's why even though I'm born and raised New Yorker, why I set Lavender House and the series in San Francisco is it had a lot more variety of queer communities and they sort of they cross-pollinated a lot more than they did in New York. In New York, it was very stratified, but in San Francisco, these folks were all living right next to each other. And so they were talking to each other. They were part of fluctuating sort of communities that interacted with one another.
Right. And, people got around on cable cars. I mean, driving in San Francisco, I had to learn to drive a stick shift in San Francisco. Even worse, I had to learn to park a stick shift in San Francisco, which required, you had to be smart about how turning your tires into the curbs and all, because you were on, a hill like that, like, sorry. And if you didn't know what you were doing, your car, could take on a
Yeah,
life
just
of its
whoosh.
own. Well, there's that great scene in some movie, Patrick can remind me what it is, where they had a big car chase in San Francisco, and it was particularly fabulous because, they'd come up over the hills and they'd be flying and, that kind of thing. But, but yeah, because it's small and walkable, thank you, Bullet, was the name
Oh
of the
yeah.
movie. Right, because it was small and walkable, people did rub shoulders in a much more frequently. But Lavender House, you didn't set it exactly in the city. I mean, you set up a real Agatha. For those of you who haven't read it, Lavender House is basically an Agatha Christie setup, and kind of a locked room mystery. I mean, it's really
Mhm.
classic crime, but set among this gay community. And what year was it? 19 what?
1952 is yeah. Yeah,
Right.
1952.
Okay. So, and Evander is still a cop and, guarding his sexuality closely because it wasn't a good idea to be a gay cop in 1952. And that's part of the series progression, isn't it? That you've moved him away from being an actual cop to being a private eye.
Yeah, exactly. Now he's a private eye for the queer community and I knew it was going to be a series because it was a multi-book deal. So I knew after Lavender House that he would have to move into the city more and move into this more Chandler-esque space than Christie. And I've had fun giving him those adventures, like he he gets to explore queer military and the Bell in the Fog. And then in the third book, it's the mafia and it's queer book clubs. And now in the fourth one, he, gets to go down to Los Angeles. What could be more fun than that?
Well, yeah, that was a real surprise, because oftentimes in a series, you don't want to move them away from their like home base, but it did make sense for him, and you can explain why in just a minute. But the other thing is that by taking him to Los Angeles, you put him into the orbit of his mother,
Yeah.
which is really tough. Right. So, tell us about the club and why it is that he's hired to reluctantly go to Los Angeles.
Yeah, so book four, Andy has really settled in as the detective for the queer community in San Francisco. He's got a boyfriend, he's got a good reputation now among the queer community, and he has a new client, a woman from the Mattachine Society, which was a real gay rights organization. And historically, they did have this conference and they split, which is mentioned in the book, in that the founders of this secret society, which they were very secret. They met in code names. They had passphrases. They organized in almost cell-like structures, so you only know the people in your group. You didn't know anyone else. And this organization, they had their first national conference, so people could actually meet each other. But during that, they ousted the founders of the organization. They didn't like where the founders were going. The founders felt that queerness was more than sexual attraction, whereas the majority of the membership felt that there was nothing else. It essentially became a battle between sort of conformity and the idea of queer culture. And so the founders were ousted. They went on to found a new organization, a magazine called One Magazine, which also features in the book. And this woman from the Mattachine Society comes to Andy because some of the members of her particular group have gone missing, and she's afraid that the founders are like taking revenge. And he tries to find these members, and in doing so, he learns about a gay motorcycle gang, which is based on a real life gay motorcycle gang. I didn't use the actual one, but the oldest continuous gay rights organization in the United States is a motorcycle club. That's a fun little trivia fact. And the motorcycle club was going down to Los Angeles. So Andy follows them there. He interacts with the motorcycle gang, with the Mattachine Society, with One Magazine, with Hollywood, and also, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, with his mother, who he has not seen in person in years and only communicated with a few times a year. She doesn't know he's queer. And she, it turns out, works at a mental institution trying to cure queer people. So that creates some immediate tension that Andy has to reconcile along with a bunch of other things. And yeah, I jokingly referred to this one as Mattachine motorcycle and mommy issues.
The
That-
three M's. You could
yeah.
be Minnesota. How interesting. You're right, though. Those are all, yeah, key words. They do all start with M. I should go back and when I mentioned Lavender House, for those of you who aren't aware of it, and Susan Elia McNeil, I think it was Susan Ely McNeil, wrote very well about lavender, most often referred to women, but also referred to marriages that were between, let's say, gay people, but he gave them an ostensible heterosexual
Mhm.
appearance. And there were quite a few Hollywood actors and so forth that participated in that. So Lavender House was actually a book about a community of gay women who hired Evander to look into a murder. Um, and
Yeah,
but that made it interesting because, you know, often we hear much more about the gay men community and less about the gay women community, although that's become a lot more visible. And now they're called, well, they were called lavender, then they were called lesbian, but the key word right at the moment in all of romance literature is sapphic.
yep.
So many people don't know sapphic, but it actually comes from a Greek woman who was I think she was a playwright, wasn't she, Sappho?
He was a
Or
poet.
a poet. Okay, well,
She's mentioned in Lavender House.
right. And so I find that interesting that the change in terminology. Why is it they're calling it sapphic instead of lesbian? Is it a prettier word? Are they hoping that people will pick it up, not knowing that it's, I mean, no, I'm really serious. Have you had any thoughts about why all of a
So
sudden
my
sapphic?
understanding, Sapphic and the more masculine version, which is Achillean, denote so if the romance or the partnership is between a woman and a non-binary feminine presenting person, that would be sapphic. So it's not lesbian because one of them isn't a woman, they're non-binary. But it's still two femme folks falling for each other, whereas Achillean would be two mask folks falling for each other, as much as that has anything to do with anything on the spectrum of gender presentation. So that's my understanding of it. So sapphic is sort of a broader term that's not just about lesbians, but can also just be about femme folks falling in love with each other.
You've already lost me. Explain what femme folk actually means. My vocabulary is severely limited, kids.
No,
So
that's
you're just
fine.
gonna
I'm
have to
happy to do
forgive
this.
it.
Femme folks, so non-binary people who present as more outwardly feminine and identify more with feminine qualities, or trans women who identify as very femme, but might not identify as lesbians necessarily. There's a lot of sort of overlap. The queer community right now is really sort of experiencing a plethora of boxes to put ourselves in,
Yeah.
which is great because the more boxes you have, the more specific you can feel, the more you can find something that suits you, you know? But that also means that there needs to be new terminology. So while lesbian exclusively refers to a woman and a woman, whether they be cis or trans, depending, like I said, sapphic can refer to a non-binary person and a woman, two non-binary people who are both feminine or assigned female at birth. there are a lot of different ways to interpret it.
Well, I'm really glad to know that. And thank you. There's a book out that you might want to take a look at just out of curiosity. Jesse and Jonathan Kellerman. And Jonathan, is a psychiatrist, or what's the other word?
Psychologist?
Yeah, I think he's a psychologist, not
Yeah,
a.
one assigns
Anyway,
drugs. I
wonderful,
don't-
wonderful man with 40, 50 years of experience dealing with children and other things. Great, great writer, great thriller writer. Anyway, he and Jesse have been writing a series set in the East Bay, around Berkeley and so forth. But the new book, Coyote Hills, uh, revolves around some victims found floating in San Francisco Bay. And so you think it's going to be a serial killer book, and it kind of is, but not really. But part of it is that they explore, or forced to explore, to try to identify some of these people or figure out what happened, all the various dating sites. And talk about a new vocabulary. Talk about being extremely specific. And I asked Jesse, I said, father of five and all. I said, Jesse, how did you, I said, I assumed it was your dad that came up with all of this information. No, no, he said, it was me. I researched it heavily, but I'm telling you, there were specifics that I wouldn't have even imagined.
I mean, on some level, it's great. I've been married 13 years. I don't know what the dating sites look like anymore. I just hear occasional horror stories from friends.
Wow.
But
No, but I mean the narrowness of the sexual proclivities is so
mhm.
startling. I mean, that's the part that threw me. I didn't realize that you could channel yourself or narrow yourself down to something. So, I mean, most of us have read Victorian literature, right? Where, guys would go to, and there'd be a dominatrix and their thing was being beaten because they were beaten in school or their thing, whatever. But those were fairly broad, and they weren't necessarily gay, I mean, they
Mhm.
could be, anybody who physical punishment was part of their deal. But this spectrum that Jesse came up with just just completely floored me.
Well, now I gotta read it.
Yeah, no, you really should. I mean, just for educational purposes, I was just flabbergasted. And for all I know, he didn't actually catch all of them. But I guess what interested me the most was, how does a person narrow themselves down that specifically? I
I
know I'm
mean,
not asking you to answer
yeah,
it.
no,
Just go
I'm
ahead.
trying to think of something though.
I mean,
I
some of them were, I'm not going to go into it. This is sort of an R-rated program, but some of them were so specific. And I thought,
Poison
you
pen at
know,
night.
how would you know that was your thing? How would you ever know that that was what turned you on in advance?
I mean, I I have friends involved in the kink community, and I've never actually asked them that. I've never been like, how did you figure it out? I guess, I mean, there must be something that draws you to it, or you see something, or something happens. I'm sure there's 1,000 different ways to figure it out, right?
I imagine that it comes from experimentation, whether voluntary or not. But nonetheless, as I said, it was the sheer specificity of the communities that you could join for, I mean, you think about Tinder or something, but way more than that. And I was fascinated by that, but I also realized that it was never possible to do that until the internet came along, because if you were, in fact, a guy in Victorian London, you would never have found on your own, you would never have been able to find all these things.
Well, Victorian London, they had those books. Do you remember those? These like reviews of the Molly houses or the whorehouses, where they would write specifically what the whorehouses were like specialized in and what each prostitute was
Yeah,
good
I
at.
guess so.
And
Yeah,
those would
maybe
get
it was.
publicized.
Who knows? Maybe it really was possible. I don't know. I've led a boring heterosexual life. I've been married for 36 years to a great guy, so this is all academic to me. But at the same time, I think it's good to be aware of, what's going on in society around us. One of the reasons I love crime fiction is that it brings you to knowledge and awareness of things that would probably never come your way if you weren't actually reading, one of these books. I mean, I have found reading crime fiction to be a lifelong course education, you know. I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Why
no,
is it that you write mysteries? What is it that attracted you to writing crime fiction?
no, that's a great way of looking at it. I think crime fiction inherently is about discovery, right? You're
Mhm.
trying to uncover things, you're trying to learn. So maybe I shouldn't say discovery so much as curiosity
Yep.
and this desire to take in information. And that is something I have always loved, you know? And so as a genre, you just said it, like it's a genre that lets you constantly educate yourself because your protagonists, the detectives, are always trying to learn things. And yes, there's the basic like who killed someone or who stole something. But in the process of that, you have to learn about human psychology, about the way people react to things, about forensics, about sex apps, about all kinds of things. And in my case, about, queer history pre-Stonewall. And that stuff is so exciting to do and being able to take that level of education and make it also fun,
Right.
because who doesn't love a mystery? Who doesn't love like, just that forward momentum of wanting to know, wanting to know, wanting to know. So I think that's what the appeal is for me and why I write it too, because I like creating a space where I get to essentially teach myself stuff.
Right. And I like having a space where I can read things. But the other part, and it's really come, have you run across Myrtle? Do you know what
Yes.
Myrtle is? Okay, so Myrtle, they're puzzle solving things, but the guy that powers them is Detective Logico, which is a wonderful name. But the point is that it also requires not just curiosity, but a wish to apply logic to solve a puzzle. And I think both those things um, really, they're brain food. Among everything else, they are actually mysteries are really anti-aging. They are truly brain food. Whether you want to actually buy Myrtle, which is one of our bestsellers, now there's a Christmas Myrtle, and just going to go on and on. But I mean, I've been surprised at how people have embraced these logical, these puzzles for crime solving.
Mhm.
But I also know, and certainly applies to me, who's about to be 85, that it does keep your brain, constantly agile if you are learning things, if you are applying some kind of logic, some kind of deductive quality to it. And I am less and less enchanted with this whole school of books with a huge twist, partly because there isn't any way to anticipate them, and therefore the logic doesn't really apply particularly. It's the surprise factor, the shock factor. But those things that I most treasure about reading crime fiction don't really come into play.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm not always a giant trying to think of the last one I really enjoyed, but I don't know if I've even read many lately that are like advertised as like the end you won't see coming. And I'm like, what's the fun of that? Like I wanna like I'm not saying I want it telegraphed, but I want to
Right.
be able to be like to me, when you read the end of a mystery, you should be like, oh, that makes sense. Like maybe you didn't call it, maybe you were like, is it this or this? But by the end of it, it should be like, oh, yes, that all makes sense to me. And
Totally.
I feel like with a lot of twists these days, that's not always what they're going for. They're going for, as you said, shock value.
Yeah. It's
So
like clicks. It's like the media's only, they're going for clicks, not for actual
yeah,
news.
that's actually a really interesting correlation. There's an essay. Someone write that essay for me, please.
There probably is. Now it's intriguing. I'm doing a Zoom event next Monday. I won't tell you who the author of the book is, but anyway, it's a really interesting book and a really interesting setup. And there was one moment about 25% in where I knew what happened. I mean, because there was just this like one thing, and you knew I mean, anybody who's really experienced in crime solving. And it was still fun to read because the way it all played out with the people in the whole bit. But there was that moment when you saw what the author, or you assumed you saw what the author, what his ultimate game was.
Mhm.
Now he could have tricked me, but he didn't. Um, and so I think, that can really be fun. Stephen Hunter wrote a book where he sent his gun guy, Swagger, Bob Lee Swagger, up against a Japanese sword guy in Japan. And so the question is, how's a guy with a gun go up against a guy with a sword? And I figured it out, and wrote to Stephen at page 162. I said, I've got it. Back and went, shit, but nonetheless,
I
I
think it's okay if you specifically figure things out early. I think
yeah.
you are kind of one of the masters, master readers of the craft, and therefore,
I don't know if that's really the case. I'm sure there are other more astute critics and more astute readers, but if you read enough, you should be able to kind of zero in. And of course, see, it would
Mhm.
have been so much more fun if I'd been wrong. Uh, I mean but it would have been from a logical standpoint, not here's the big surprise that you never
Mhm.
could see coming standpoint. And I think that's the difference. There's such a plethora of the shock value books that I have really kind of turned away from them because, it's just, but that happens, in publishing and crime fiction or any genre, is that if it works, everybody wants to do the same thing. And then it becomes so prevalent that it becomes, at least for me, becomes boring. And then you're looking for, something more refreshing. Or you can go back to the classics, which has
Yeah.
been since COVID, really drove people back to the classics.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it did. Our classics expansion, sorry, try it again. Our classics section at the bookstore keeps expanding. And I'm talking all genre. I am not talking, crime. In
Mhm.
fact, at the moment, you'll love this. We are really more a romance store. Our biggest events, almost always, with few exceptions, are romance events.
Why aren't I coming to you with my romance books then?
I don't know. That's your fault, not mine.
Well, I'm going
I'm
to talk to my publicists.
Yeah, I've really been interested. I think part of it is that they tend to be younger readers.
Hmm.
Part of it is they're more willing to come out, at night. Part of it is they're more active on social media, so they're already kind of a community.
Hmm.
But I really have been impressed by the embrace that younger readers have given to, it's not just, romance, but more romantasy, but sometimes
Oh
just
yeah,
romance.
real big
It's
right
kind of
now.
that fusion of fantasy and romance and then also on the horizon and gaining speed is horror, which is kind of the opposite of the cozy. And we've done two or three horror events this fall, and all of them have been very successful. And I had absolutely no idea what to expect because, it wasn't an audience that we were at all familiar with.
Hmm.
So I think that we're seeing, kind of a shift into new areas is what the reason I brought it up.
Yeah, no, horror has gotten the New York. We just have a horror exclusive bookstop that just opened.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, Twisted Spine.
Right, which is an
Um,
interesting name for a bookstore, I thought.
I know.
I know. I
It's
tried. Well,
funny.
I
It works
mean,
on multiple levels.
a city like New York with a population of that size that moves around can support, Phoenix is just too big and too flat. Do you know Phoenix is bigger geographically than Los Angeles?
Really? I did not
Yeah.
know that. No.
It's the
Huh.
biggest city geographically in the country. It's either the fourth or fifth biggest in population, and we have no public transportation.
Yeah, that feels like an oversight.
Well,
I don't
but
know if you
that's
can hear the New York outside my window right now.
Well, I think it's the reason that our streaming remains so successful is that it even locally, it's often difficult for people to buck traffic and navigate, 40 miles each way to the bookstore or something. So it happens to work for us. I'm sure at some point Phoenix is going to have to catch up. I mean, we have a light rail, but it just shuttles students around and there's a small airport version of it. But where we are, I mean, it's a thriving Uber and we're a Waymo test case and all the rest of it. So are you going to do, speaking of driving, are you going to incorporate some interesting driving? And I've already mentioned to you the cable cars and the whatever. It seems to me that
He,
you could do something with all that.
I know, and I'm not a car person at all.
No, but you
I,
don't need to be, I mean, you could have like, murder on the cable car or whatever. Because I mean,
oh, that's a fun idea.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
If they can make
actually,
more books in the series, maybe I'll do that.
well, I mean, I actually paid money to restore. They had a campaign for, I think it was the Nob Hill cable car was in desperate need of updating in the whole bit. And I remember the campaign, it was in the teens, I think, and I donated, a couple $100 to it just out of nostalgia. And also the ferry system was still operating heavily. So you could really do something interesting with San Francisco in terms of its unique transportation.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of ways to move a body.
There really is. And I'm not sure if they're actually transport police. I mean, that's another interesting
That's a
thought.
good question. I should look into that.
You really should,
Um,
because I just read a British mystery and realized that both British Rail and British Transport have their own um, um, law enforcement communities. You
just made a
know,
note.
yeah, I know. Isn't this fun? I get to help plot books.
I know, no, this is
I,
great.
I kind of miss editing. We sold Poison Pen Press, which has had any number of number one bestsellers recently, for which we are congratulated. And unfortunately, Rob and I sold the press in 2018, so not us.
I
Um,
know, and I have a book coming out with them next year.
you do?
Yeah.
How fun. I love it. Well, we get a lot of mail for Poison Pen Press still, so I love it. Anyway, what is it that you anticipate doing with your series? Are you going to be under contract for more?
Not yet. There was my editor moved from Minotaur to St. Martin, or from Tor Forge to St. Martin's
Right.
Minotaur, which is all under Macmillan. So I got a whole new team for this, and it's, we're hoping that they renew the series. But this is a new team, and we really need to sort of show them how much this series means to people. So, if I've been encouraging people to email Minotaur and be like, I love these books, they're so important to me, and all that, but I'm not sure yet. I mean, fingers crossed. I would love to write more in this series, and I know all sorts of things I would like to write specifically. I have a whole document that I'm now going to add transit police to. And so, I could keep this going for ages, I think. And it's really just about readership and numbers.
Well, that's very true, although there are other roads to publishing at this point, if you have an
Yeah.
audience.
And I'm
Um,
considering those, but I've been told not to speak about them too much.
No, you don't need to, but talk to me should it come to that. I would never recommend it to a new writer, but for writers who have an established audience and all, there are opportunities, to keep a series going if you love it while you're doing something else. Of course, it means, more writing.
Yeah.
Um,
But
right.
hey, that's a joy.
Obviously, you really love it. So, tell us about your romance books before we bring Patrick around, because we've only talked to you really about this series about your crime.
Yeah, I write young adult romance too under LC Rosen, which are these books here. I had one that just came out in September called You've Goth My Heart. The original title was You've Got the Mail, but I was told teenagers don't know who Meg Ryan is. And it's just about two goth boys who, due to a wrong number text, sort of anonymously fall in love with each other while also competing in a Halloween decorating competition. So it goes back to the Hungarian play Parfumerie, Shop Around the Corner, She Loves Me, all of those. It's in that long history, which I love.
That's great. Well, I'm going, obviously you really enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah.
And,
Plus, I have no other skills.
well, there's that too. But I do think that readers can tell when writers really love what they're doing, as opposed to just like phoning something in. And, that's one of the charms of your books is that your own enthusiasm really comes through.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
I'm
So, Patrick, come and
saving
join
that
us
one.
and tell us if we have any questions from the audience or comments from you.
Hey, let's see. No, not a lot of questions. Well, there was one that I just missed. Yeah. Do you have kind of an end game plan, or do you envision how many more you'd like to write in the series, or where would you like to take it in time?
I mean, I would love to essentially have the books go through the entire 50s. And that's because in the 1959 mayoral election, there was this sort of minor scandal, let's say, and it involves the Mattachine Society, actually. I don't remember the name of the two candidates, the names of the candidates, but one of them had his one of his staff members join the Mattachine Society and propose a resolution endorsing his opponent, which he then leaked to the press. Oh, the homosexuals want you to elect this guy. Therefore, vote for me. And it backfired like crazy. And I think that that unto itself is a mystery waiting to happen. Like, who infiltrated? Who is this person? And also, like, there's just something about it backfiring that I think would speak to Andy and his arc about like the world he has sort of come up through since he was kicked off the force and what his life could really look like going forward. So to me, that would be the end game. But I've also been doing like two books per year in the timeline. So the first two are in 52 and the second two are in 53, which means there's 6 more years, which would be 12 more books, which feels a little long, but maybe doable. I don't know. I don't know. So yeah, I'd love to take it to that mayoral election in 1959. I think that would be a good ending spot for Andy.
Yeah, that is such a good idea. The late Ellis Peters, one of my very favorite people, when she wrote the Brother Cadfael series, which was an enormous success, was writing her way towards 20 books, and the series was going to end when Henry II took the throne. She was writing her way all the way through the Matilda versus Stephen controversy, and sadly, she died at book 19. It's like Sue Grafton, who, was going to write all the way to Z and sadly died at book,
Hmm.
at Y. And I think it's great to have, an end, a date in an event that coincide to be significant when you're writing a series rather than just it falls, apart.
Yeah, no, and it's funny because San Francisco, then you can look like there was the San Francisco Stonewall in 65. There was all this queer history happening, especially by the time we get to the 60s. But for some reason, ending it at 59 with that election feels like it's right. I think because one of the things I talk about Andy being is like I had this conversation with someone earlier this year, but as gay rights were progressing in the 50s and 60s, and they were. There were these, one magazine started. There are all these things. We were gaining more exposure as a community. There was pushback. And that, you see that all the time. It happens now, where queer people gain visibility and rights, and then people say, no, 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 go back to the way it was. And I feel like those clashes of the pushback is where Andy comes along to sort of clean up the mess afterwards. And so to me, that like having him do that through the 50s would be appropriate because by the 60s, the messes that were happening were not really being cleaned up as much. They were staying angry, they were staying in the public mind, and that has to do with the rise of sort of, counterculture as well. So I think the 50s are where Andy should stay.
I agree with you. I think it's an area that, of course, I lived through it, so I see it differently. But post-war America, somebody said that living in the United States in the second half of the 20th century was as good as it's ever been in the whole history of the world. And the 50s was really kind of pivotal to, to all of that, to getting the war past us and now we're tearing it all down. Um, but I do think that it is on the surface boring, but a more important time than people realize.
Oh, I don't think it's, yeah, I mean, you're right. When people talk about the 50s, they do talk about it like it's boring. And I'm always like, no, no, let me tell you all the things that were happening.
Well, partly because it had this sort of coating of conformity, but
Yeah,
underneath it, all kinds of stuff was happening. Every
exactly. And that's what makes it even
fashion.
more fun and more mystery related, I think.
Yeah.
Everyone loves a good conformity surface with something brewing underneath it.
What do you think, Patrick, about crime fiction in the 50s? Do you feel that it was, what kind of time was it for crime?
Well, I mean, it was kind of the golden age of noir for
Exactly.
sure. I think that, underneath the Norman Rockwell facade of America, was all kinds of dark stuff happening, and that whole generation just coming back from the war, um, wanted more adult fare, and you see all the great films that were coming out during that time period. you know um,
You're right. The movies really shaped so much back then. I mean, I used to take my quarter and go to the community house, where we had our little local movie theater in Winnetka every weekend. And that was what we as high schoolers did. We had like four movie theaters we had to get our parents to drive us to. But that's where we all hung out. It really was.
there's a great one. I mean, there are tons of great books, but one of my favorites is Patricia Highsmith's book, Edith's Diary, and it's about this woman. Have you read it, Lev?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's about this woman who's trapped in the Norman Rockwell kind of thing. And
Hmm.
she's actually an artist and a writer, and she's just like stuck in this moment in time. And she slowly goes mad. It's a kind of a classic Patricia Highsmith idea. But yeah, I mean, there wasn't a lot of room for all these different subcultures in
Hmm.
mainstream culture yet.
Yeah,
They
but
were just
it was
simmering.
bubbling along. I mean, the
Yeah,
British
oh yeah,
finally
definitely.
decriminalized homosexuality. When was it? 1959, 58, something like that.
Well, they made it legal for queer people to hang out in 52, for gay bars to be legal,
Right.
essentially. But then they kind of took it back, and I have to do a little more research into this in 55 or 56. And then they decriminalized it. Was it 58?
It was either 58 or 59, I'm reasonably
I'd
sure.
have to check my notes, but
Too
yeah.
late for Alan Turing, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, he's one of the real victims, I think, of the criminalization of homosexuality. Oscar Wilde, and well, Oscar Wilde was an idiot that brought it on himself by tweeting the wrong guy. So it's hard to really feel sorry for Oscar Wilde. But Alan Turing is the story that always just breaks my heart.
Yeah. Were there any mystery writers, Lev, that sort of inspired you early on? Was who wrote the Dave Brandstetter novel?
Joseph, what is it?
Hanson.
Yeah,
Joseph Hans.
Joseph Hansen, right?
Yeah, he inspired me not until after I had finished Lavender House, actually. I didn't know
Really?
about him until after but oh man, that man can write. Could write. I have that whole series. I love those books. I think it's because they were reissued right around that time, and so they were difficult to come by before then, but they were reissued right around or right before Lavender House came out, I think. Nice covers, and they are. I still remember one of it. I can't remember which book it's in, but he describes a typewriter as punching holes in the silence. And I was like, oh, that's a great turn of phrase. That one stays with me, punching holes in the silence. So yeah, just those are great, great books. But if you're asking what influenced me, I would say it would be Chandler more than anything else. You know, I grew up with a lot of the movies. So if you look at like Lavender House and the way that it has a sort of, I don't think of them as cozies. I think of them as sort of soft yolk noirs, jammy egg noirs, where there is this sort of warmth at the end. And it's not just like, well, everyone's dead and I'm going to smoke my cigarette and walk into the sunset. It's more, well, a lot of bad things happen, but we have each other. And to me, that's how a lot of the noir films ended. You know, you think of like The Big Sleep, you think of Bogey and Bacall at the very end, and it's like, yeah, you got it all figured out, except for one thing. What's that? What about me? Oh, there's nothing wrong with you that I can't fix or that you can't fix. And they embrace, and you hear the swelling of the sirens, and it fades to black, and you're like, oh, okay, like they're in trouble, but they have each other. And that is not really how the books always felt. The books definitely had more of a he's alone now vibe. And I think that that warmth at the end of the movies was really where I draw a lot of the inspiration from. My jammy yolk noir.
Any TV interest in the series?
There was, and then the writer's strike happened, and some of the people involved were not based in America, so they kind of went on with what they were doing, and it all fell apart, unfortunately. But there are still people interested, but it's about getting together the correct group of people. Hollywood.
Right. Not easy. Right.
Yeah.
I think that's about it.
I can tell you about that book from Press coming out next year if you want to hear about
Okay.
that. That's a new
Please do.
series. It's called the Disaster Gay Detective Agency. It's contemporary New York, and it's a funny mystery about four friends who are genuinely the worst people you've ever met. And they accidentally get involved in some international espionage.
Oh, wow. That sounds like a lot of fun.
I hope so. It's me sort of bridging my romantic comedy and mystery worlds
Right.
together and writing like a fun, funny mystery series. And the cover should be out for that pretty soon too.
When
Keep a
is it
lookout.
publishing?
That'll be June next year.
Okay. Ah, during Gay Pride Month.
Yep.
Yay. So, I found it interesting just to sign off. This Supreme Court, in my view, are just politicians in robes with very little moral compass. But I did wonder if they were going to not hear the gay marriage challenge
Mhm.
because, you know, overturning Roe versus Wade meant they were dealing with things that hadn't yet happened. But to destabilize 10 years of families, children, marriages, whatever, would really be would really be awful. And I was pleased to see they swatted it down. I was surprised actually,
It was
but
a really bad case, is my understanding. From what I've seen from queer legal experts, it's more likely they're going to keep marriage in name, but chip away at the benefits that are guaranteed by it, so that employers don't can be like, oh yeah, you're married, but I don't have to give you this.
wow, really?
Um, yeah, so that's the stuff to look out for, and it'll be piece by piece, little chip by chip. But what really hit me, and this was like a weird bit of irony. The back matter in the back of Mirage City talks a little about conversion therapy and the history of conversion therapy. And the day it came out, the Supreme Court heard a case on conversion therapy and essentially started saying that psychiatrists, it was illegal to say that psychiatrists could not practice conversion therapy. They ruled in favor of a psychiatrist who wanted to be practicing conversion therapy, which is, a proven sort of form of torture at this point. And it's wild to watch that happen on the day that, these techniques in the book that I get into are all historically accurate. everything that happens that Andy sees happen was stuff that was happening. And on some level, it's stuff that is still happening. And that's just wild to me, especially the day the book came out. I was just wandering around being like, what is happening?
I'm really
Forgive my,
excited to hear that.
I was
Yeah.
just going to say, forgive my ignorance, but what is convergent? Is it convergence therapy?
No,
Conversion.
conversion.
Oh,
So the
conversion, of course.
idea is that you can turn gay people straight using various techniques. And the in the book, it is essentially a form of torture. I didn't go so far. I'll tell you another form of so as not to spoil the book. A form I did not use in the book that was used in the 50s was men would have electrodes attached to their testicles and they'd be shocked as they were exposed to images of naked men. And that the idea would be like, oh, you're going to associate naked men with pain now, and then you won't be gay anymore. And these days, it can still be sort of torturous, and it's usually done to teenagers who have no choice in the matter. Their parents tell them, you're going to do this or you're going to be disowned. And sometimes it can involve beating or being locked away, traumatized for a while. But in many states, it was illegal for psychiatrists to be involved. And so it was usually religious figures, but now it's looking like psychiatrists can be involved. Although, flip side, not many will want to be, thankfully, because they recognize it as torture if you've gone through school. But yeah, it's rough. It's rough out there.
Patrick, it's actually been the basis of a number of crime novels. People,
Is that right?
children kidnapped and forced into conversion therapy and all. It's a variation on cults. But the only reason I know about it is I've read several books that where conversion therapy is at the heart.
Well, there's the whole pray the gay away kind of idea too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, every time people try to police, human, I don't know what the word is I want here. It always fails. The what am I trying to think of that, the anti-liquor thing. Every time,
Prohibition. Yeah.
Prohibition.
yeah, thank you. Prohibition. Every time there's an attempt to legislate or criminalize stuff that people are going to do or like whatever, it never goes well. And
Yeah.
what it does is it fosters criminal behavior. I mean, there are probably more people that died during Prohibition from poisoning of one sort or another or alcoholism than was true if they had, you know, left it alone.
Yeah.
So
It's
one wishes there'll be more women dying of illegal abortions than if they hadn't overturned Roe versus Wade. But anyway, there's no point in going down that road. Let's say thank you very much for joining us again. It was a real pleasure to spend time with you.
It is always a delight to talk to you, Barbara.
Thank you. Keep me posted and let's talk about your Poison Pen Press book when next June. That'd be
Absolutely. I'm
exciting.
excited.
Okay, I am too. Thanks, everybody. We do still have some signed copies of Mirage City. And I think, if you'd like to, if nothing else, if you want to look at Los Angeles in the 1950s, before it really took off, before Disneyland opened in I think it was 57, 58, around in there, because I went to it the first year it was open as a freshman. Um, and changed completely. So if you're interested in history of cities and so forth, this is a really good book to read for that reason alone. Right. So, night, everybody. Thank